and Dr. BESE, what do you call the AGI meeting to order, please? First item, please. I'm sorry, can I get a roll call?
Dr. BESE? Present. Mr. Castillo?
Here.
Dr. Davis? Here. Ms. Ellis? Here. Mr. Garvey? Ms. Holloway? Here. Mr. Mellering? Mr. Morris?
Here.
Ms. Orange-Jones? Here. Mr. Rock?
Here.
Ms. Boucher? Here. And Mr. Zach Johnson?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. If we could, Ms. Landry, Superintendent Roman, I'd like to take a moment for it's one of the privilege I could to speak to this group of aspiring teachers in front of us. Probably 20 years ago, I guess, I started a scholarship at LSU pursuing a career in education. And over 20 years, with an ExxonMobil batch, that endowment is currently sitting at $750,000. And here recently, given the significant need that we have for quality educators in the classroom, my wife and I increased that commitment to $1 billion. So I would encourage you to apply at LSU to Dr. Gary Matthews at the College of Education. Those funds are readily available, and I would estimate it's probably about $40,000 a year towards student scholarships. So just want to bring that to your attention and hope that you'll apply. Thank you. First item, please.
The consent agenda is ready for your approval, adding item 5.1.
Can I get a motion, please? Mr. Rock, second. Mr. O'Shea? Does the department have any information on this one, Superintendent? Okay. Objections? Hearing none, motion passes. Next item, please.
The first item is on page 12, item 3.1, consideration of the 2021 fall reading report. The department recommendation is to approve the report and direct the department, the LDE, to submit the report to the House and Senate Committees on Education in accordance with Louisiana Revised Statute 17182.
Motion, please. Dr. Bovee, can I get a second? President Holloway, thank you. Superintendent?
Yes, sir. Really, we're going to use this particular opportunity around the fall reading report just to share out a few of the endeavors in which we're working to get better outcomes for our students in literacy. And we talked earlier about some of the numbers relative to students going into alternative education programs. And I tend to think one of the best doses of medicine we can give all those students is the ability to read at a young age. And we're really proud of the efforts that we're undertaking, and we just want to use the opportunity, like we did last month with some of the efforts around school transformation with some of our most needed schools, to just share some of the things that we're working on around this particular item.
Dr. Chason?
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Good morning, everyone. This morning, I will take an opportunity to talk with you all about both the fall reading report and our early literacy commission report. So this presentation will address both of those reports and summarize some high-level information about those reports and about our ongoing work as a department and across the state. So we'll begin with our mission. Louisiana students will have improved literacy outcomes through high-quality instruction and interactions by an effective teacher who is supported by leaders and families. And this mission really is the groundwork for these driving literacy improvements. Next, we have our 2021 Fall Reading Report data. We see growth across all grade levels this year with an overall growth of 4.1%. Literacy rates have shown a steady decline since 2017, and this is the first year-to-year growth we have seen since then. We are really excited to see an upward trajectory, but we must acknowledge that we have a long way to go, with still only 49% of Louisiana students entering the school year reading on level in kindergarten through third grade. I also want to acknowledge the origin of this data, as I always do when talking with anyone about the fall reading report, where this data comes from. school systems choose between 4 approved literacy screeners. Teachers administer the assessments. Schools compile the data and submit that data to school systems, and school systems self-report that data. This is not a secure test or considered a secure test administration, so there is some amount of room for human error. So I want to acknowledge that with this data. This is the way the fall reading report has always been compiled, but I just want to drive especially today the message that this is why our work towards a single universal literacy screener that is statewide and administered securely is so important for us to have that good, solid, valid data that we feel really good about for literacy in our state. But overall, we want to celebrate this data because we do see systems working so diligently on their literacy improvements. And I think we can see some of the fruits of their efforts in this improvement and some of that regain in the numbers from pre-COVID. But I also want to acknowledge that this is why a few months ago, I believe at the August BESE meeting, I sat before you all and talked about our literacy goal. And so I just wanted to bring back that goal to you all today. We've set our literacy goal as a clear, long-term, and quantifiable goal based on a strong national indicator for reading ability. We've set that goal based on NAEP, and we've looked long-term at outcomes to say that by 2027, Louisiana's 4th grade NAEP results will increase by 10 points in comparison to the 2019 results, placing Louisiana above the national average in 4th grade reading performance. If rankings remain steady, this would place us in the high 20s in rankings. So just wanted to acknowledge that literacy goal again, and just to reiterate that that is why we have chosen to set a literacy goal based on NAEP that really stacks us nationally against other states and not on this particular assessment. We believe that these Louisiana literacy pillars that we have put in place are the base for all of our literacy improvements. We believe that literacy outcomes for students will improve when these 4 pillars of literacy are effectively implemented at the school system and state levels. These pillars are what have driven our Louisiana Comprehensive Literacy Plan. And in that plan, we highlight crucial actions at both the state and LEA levels aligned to each pillar. I wanted to highlight a little about the 2021 legislative session. This is a suite of very comprehensive legislation that is really driving a good bit of our statewide literacy improvements. You see Act 108, and this act requires early literacy training for our kindergarten through 3rd grade teachers and school leaders. And it also requires that school systems report to us on that successful training completion. This is going to be so important in building that robust knowledge and skills that our educators need to drive literacy improvement in classrooms. Act 438 requires early literacy instruction for kindergarten through 3rd grade students. The annual literacy assessment, like we talked about a few minutes ago, that we are working on currently. Literacy supports for certain students, such as intervention supports, professional development, school and system literacy plans, and annual literacy reporting by schools to parents and to us as a state. We also see Senate Resolution 133, and this requested the department to recreate the Louisiana Early Literacy Commission to once again study and make recommendations for our literacy improvements as a state. So this is our 3rd year of the Louisiana Early Literacy Commission, and it was such a wonderful opportunity to get stakeholders together as a commission and talk about what we have accomplished and what we still need to do as a state. So I really appreciate everyone on that commission bringing their time, expertise, and talent to contribute to that commission's report. This report was received earlier in the Administration and Finance Committee meeting. The next set of slides walks through the work of the Early Literacy Commission. The first goal is for for every teacher to use a high-quality curriculum to teach students the foundations of reading and language and literacy. The Commission urges to continue reviewing the K-12 ELA instructional materials to ensure the 5 components of reading are explicitly taught. And they also recommended to include explicit writing instruction and science of reading alignment to the instructional materials rubric. They also wanted us to ensure that all the reviewers of the instructional materials process are trained themselves in the science of reading so that they can recognize it in the materials that they review. The Commission also felt strongly about providing a list of which school systems use which curricula to encourage collaboration between school systems and transparency to stakeholders. The next goal was for every student who struggles to read to receive research-based literacy interventions. For every school leader to maximize the use of instructional time and personnel through scheduling and collaborative planning. And for this goal, the Commission recommended that we continue supporting school systems and literacy schedule development. This is something we've done quite a bit of work on. The department is helping our school systems carve out time explicitly for core instruction in literacy and for literacy interventions for students who need them. They also recommended that we create an instructional materials tool for ELA foundational skills for us to identify additional resources that can be used in classrooms for intervention. Also, to ensure that K-2 curriculum reviews include those embedded interventions so that that materials review process is explicitly looking for materials that include intervention materials. And also to create evidence-based intervention guidance. So this is something we've also been working on quite a bit at the department. It's helping school leaders and teachers understand what are best practices in intervention. The next goal is around working with our educator preparation programs. We have had a lot of collaboration, a lot of collaborative work between higher education and K-12 in this area. And the goal is for every educator preparation program to emphasize evidence-based literacy practices as they prepare teachers for our workforce. So we will continue, we have already begun to review and evaluate licensure assessments for pre-K through 5th and special education licensure to ensure teacher preparation candidates are assessed on their literacy knowledge aligned to the science of reading. We also are in our 2nd year of the ELA Collaborative, and during year 1, the group established a set of model course syllabi designed in partnership between K-12 literacy experts and our teacher preparation faculty that teach literacy courses. So we've really seen our K-12 literacy experts and our teacher preparation faculty come together to design those syllabi during year 1 of the ELA Collaboratives. And currently in year 2, last year's participants are coaching new collaborative members on how to integrate those practices into their literacy courses. So in time, we will see prep candidates matriculate out of those programs into classrooms even better prepared to teach literacy. We also have shared our literacy training for teacher preparation and administrator preparation program faculty. We currently have 54 participants from higher education signed up to participate in the Science of Reading training this year, which is really exciting. And they represent 18 of our preparation provider programs across the state. In some next steps, we plan to review and as needed revise the educator preparation review process to include actionable course-specific feedback. And we also plan to publish a handbook around the preparation evaluation process. This is something that we heard from commission members representing higher education, that they wanted even better, more explicit feedback on how to improve their programs and how to improve their literacy courses. The next goal is around professional growth. Every school has a culture in which all teachers are responsible for and equipped to deliver effective literacy instruction, and for every teacher to use evidence-based practices to meet the literacy needs of all students. And with this, the commission really recommended that we continue to ensure all stakeholders whose work is directly related to pre-K through third grade literacy are trained in the science of reading, so that aligns to Act 108 that I spoke about earlier, including but not limited to teachers, our school system leaders, speech language pathologists, including those educators who work with special education, dyslexia, and intervention implementation. There was also a recommendation to continue our literacy coach program. We currently have 177 K-2 literacy coaches in our CIR, UIRA schools. And we plan to continue and expand the program in years to come. We also will continue providing regional literacy specialists to provide support for literacy in K-2 schools. In next steps, the commission felt strongly about really expanding the literacy coach work into early childhood networks. So that's something we're working on as well. What would it look like to have literacy coaches, literacy specialists supporting those networks, supporting our teachers in those early childhood classrooms around language and literacy development. We've also realized how important it is to have a district literacy coordinator, to have someone at the system level who is really a champion for literacy. And so that was a next step recommendation as well. The commission also recognizes the importance of families in a child's literacy journey. And so they set the goal for every teacher to use literacy assessment data to monitor students' progress and inform instruction. This is part of Act 438, that we have some regular ongoing reporting to families around where their child's literacy progress is. It's too late for a parent to find out at the end of the year that their child is struggling in literacy. And so Act 438 really spells out around that parent communication and reporting so that families have a good, clear sense throughout the year of how their child is progressing in literacy. And so a next step was for us to work on launching a literacy media campaign to increase families and communities' knowledge about the importance of effective literacy screening and instruction from birth to age 8. We have many resources currently available in the literacy library, and this is something that we showed the commission and let them know about. So as they compiled their report and their next steps, they were able to look at what work the department has done based on previous recommendations and make those really specific next step recommendations that I just highlighted with you all. And so we have a plethora of resources available, and we've heard about a lot of school systems and schools utilizing these resources. I wanted to highlight a few of them for you all today. On the left is a template for local literacy plans. We've done a lot of work with school systems around driving these robust plans that are very comprehensive so that they are really ensuring that they are using evidence-based best practices in their schools. And so this really begins, we feel, at the school system level so that they are able to really promote and engage with school leaders in driving those school level plans. So we've produced templates and professional development for school system leaders. We've helped them with their local literacy plans. On the right, you see a document. This is a template for reporting. So this is something that any teacher can use and fill in with their student data. We have some examples for teachers to use to communicate with families about how their child is progressing. These are some other resources available. On the left is a helpful guide for what we should see in classrooms that are really using those science of reading best practices. And on the right, we see examples of sound walls that serve as visual cues for students in their classrooms. We also worked with a family literacy engagement work group to compile a strategic plan so that school systems and schools really have a complete and comprehensive set of ways that they can engage with families. One of the things that we so much recognize is that schools aren't not communicating with families because they don't want to. it's sometimes because they need additional ideas for how, and they need to be made a little easier because time is of the essence as a school leader. And so the Family Literacy Engagement Strategic Plan is a document, a guidance document that is really meant to be supportive in helping school leaders find it easier to communicate with families by giving some helpful ideas and supports there. The other document that you see on this slide is called Building Literacy Skills at Home. And these are a set of resources directly for families that we've also put into our literacy library. They're directly family facing, and they're ideas for families at each step of a child's age span. And so this particular one is for toddlers. And so it is just a list of ideas and activities that families should be doing or could be doing with their children at home. So those are available on our website as well. So our resources are for teachers, for school leaders, for system leaders, but also for families as well. And our literacy library is located on our Louisiana BESE website. And so just a few things about what's to come. You all know that we are working towards that single universal screener like we've talked about. We are in the selection process of really finding a tool that helps our educators with data-driven instruction and really can provide a metric to determine if progress is being made in K-2. This tool is going to be so helpful for us as a state to know where we are, but also it's meant to be super helpful for teachers who are doing this work day in and day out. They need to know what deficits each child in their classroom has in regards to reading. And then their science of reading training through Acc 108 will help them become more knowledgeable and skilled in how to address those deficits. Some other next steps are the expansion of the literacy coaching program, who will continue to provide job-embedded support to teachers in all schools, and also that expansion into our early childhood network that we're working on. We're also preparing for Teacher Leaders Summit, where we will have just an array of sessions for literacy implementation for leaders and teachers. This is in addition to our ongoing PD series that we've hosted as a department. We've had thousands of educators across the state tune into both our live professional development. Afterwards, we record those sessions and make them available so school leaders and teachers can access them afterwards in our literacy library. So we'll be doing some expansion of that work at Teacher Leaders Summit, our ongoing professional development work. We'll also, for the first time ever, have a specific literacy coach track and a librarian track because we believe librarians have a big role in a child's literacy journey. And we need to highlight that and support our librarians in their work. And we'll also be showcasing literacy innovations across the state. We have a lot of schools, a lot of systems doing really great work. I think our data this year shows that. It shows the increased efforts. It's really shown a spotlight on early literacy in our state, and we've really seen our educators in the field rise to that challenge. So we are looking forward to what's to come.
Thank you, Dr. Jason. Members' comments? Ms. O'Shea?
I have a couple of questions. Obviously, this is going to be a major initiative, and this is a great model, and we pursue this heavily. All of our, and as a result of the legislation in this program, all of our K-3 teachers and school administrators must be trained in the science of reading, which I'm trying to remember, I think it's 54 hours of training with the vendor which is expensive and very time consuming. And we're all the districts are embarking on this now with our K-3 educators and our school-based administrators looking through this extensive training. I know the state has come up with some money to pay these particular vendors in order to do it. But for the long term, and I thought maybe in this next step, these K-12, K-3 educators as well as special educators should be coming out of our colleges and universities and teacher prep programs with that training already done as part of a coursework, or if it's a teacher prep program as part of what they require. Where are we with trying to make that happen in communication with our colleges and universities, making sure that when our teachers come out with that certification, they already have this? Because if that's going to be the cornerstone of our program and we're going to invest heavily in this, it would be very advantageous for them to have had that training in their college prep program. So where are we with that?
So Superintendent Boche, that is in the works. That's part of our ELA collaborative that you heard me talk about earlier, is that we are embedding a lot of this knowledge in the literacy courses that our teacher preparation candidates are receiving. We also know we will always have teachers who are not going through those programs, or through the entirety of that program. We'll have alternatively certified teachers. So we know that we'll always have some amount of teachers who are in need of this in years to come. And yes, you are correct that we are using some of our ESSER set-aside funds to pay right now for our kindergarten through third grade teachers and leaders to receive this training. And so our plan for what happens in the aftermath is we will create a science, and we have begun to work on creating a science of reading training ourselves that we would then be able to offer to any teachers who still need it. And so this would also be offered for our teacher preparation providers to be able to utilize in their literacy coursework.
And our colleges and universities, you're including them in our teacher preparation providers.
Yes.
That states.
Yes, they are included.
All right, the second question I have is, when you talk about the educative preparation, and this is on page 16 of our handout, ensure licensure assessment for pre-K-5 and special education licensure aligns to science of reading. Are we talking of, does the current reading assessment that they take under practice, what assessment are you looking for? Is this going to be satisfied through the praxis assessment in that teaching of reading? Or are you looking at a different type of assessment, or will the assessment come as a result of completion of that teaching prep program wherever they take it?
So that's something, Superintendent Boche, that our early literacy work group is diving really deeply into right now. And we'll have that set of recommendations included in the policy that we bring to y'all, but they're diving into what is currently assessed through praxis, and does it align to our science of reading best practices and what we call those literacy competencies in the preparation space. And so they are working right now in their work group to determine that alignment and then make some recommendations around, should we have a shift in which practice is being assessed?
Should we have a
Should we have a shift in which practice is being used for licensure? So that's something that we don't have the results of yet, but the work group is studying that alignment.
or at least assessments to exit these preparation programs, which are based on this?
Dr. Chase, just to follow up on Superintendent Gaucher's comment, what's the timing on the training that will be included with university curriculum?
So we're seeing some shifts as early as this year. As far as the full training, I would say we're 2 years out from the full training being more embedded within the literacy coursework. I know we're seeing some shifts this year when we think about that ELA collaborative and the work that they did last year to ensure more alignment in their courses for this year.
Thank you. Dr. Courtney?
At the beginning, you talked about our overall goal. Could you restate that? I can't find it in writing. Or point it
Thank you, Dr. Courtney.
What's that?
I said thank you. I just said comment. I didn't see it in writing. I think it's a fantastic goal.
So our goal is by 2027, Louisiana's 4th grade NAEP results will increase by 10 points in comparison to the 2019 results. And what this would do is it would place Louisiana above the national average in 4th grade reading performance.
I think it would be helpful if we add that to these presentations, because I think having that metric in place and front and center will be really helpful to us. I really appreciate the comprehensiveness of this plan. It looks like it is a strategy that approaches it from a curriculum and material standpoint, from a goal and like what the North Star is for this, teacher training, which is absolutely incredible. I heard you and Ms. Boucher discussing like educator preparation. So the investment that the state and districts are making in professional development is not required over time because we'll start getting that in our educator preparation programs. I know that you all, Mississippi's come up a lot about this, and I know that you guys have been in communication with them. I know Dr. Brumley has had that conversation. Mr. Morris talked about it as well. Is there anything that we're missing? Is there anything that we haven't gotten to yet, or you need more help and support with?
So that's a great question. We've conferred a lot with our Mississippi colleagues. I know Dr. Brumley spoke about that earlier. We actually attend collaborative events with Mississippi and other states who are working on similar work. And Mississippi certainly has a model. I think to Dr. Brumley's point earlier, we have really comprehensive legislation that was passed last spring. That is really heavy work for everyone involved in these literacy improvements. I believe that everything is there that we need in place in that legislation. We will have subsequent BESE policy that we'll be bringing in front of you all in the next few months. That was, required by that legislation. And so I think continuing this work, we'll continue to see literacy improvements. It was a really comprehensive, between Act 108 and Act 438, we have really comprehensive policy that mirrors much of what Mississippi has done.
So you need yes votes from us moving forward on policies. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. The other piece, I want to tell you, like I said, I appreciate the comprehensiveness. Also appreciate the idea of like putting out our school leaders and teachers, like these communications about read to your children, in different ways because of the reminders. And I think that is really helpful. I think it's something that we as board members can also help to communicate. So, sometimes it's about us sharing the things that the department puts out on social media, or when we're talking to people, continuing to remind people the power in actually sitting in a recliner with your child or with your grandchild or your niece and nephew and reading a book, and how powerful it is to use words and have those conversations, because unfortunately in our society, people have moved past it. It was one of the most beautiful gifts that my family gave me, and I think it's something that we as leaders can continue to help communicate and remind people and just point people back to the value of reading and the importance of reading together. So I can do that. I can give you yes votes, and I can continue to talk about it and give that call to action as we talk to other people and that reminder. I also think even just the encouragement, because I now have firsthand knowledge of how busy it is to be a principal, but like putting signs on like the marquee, some of our schools even have the electronic signs of read to your children, and just continuing to push those messages, because I think people just, they go about their busy day of contact tracing and notifications and compass evaluations and all these other things, that it's just hard to remember everything. And I really appreciate you putting them in a format that really helps people communicate it out. So thank you so much for this work. Kind of like we were looking at the early childhood information earlier, Mr. Morris and I had that conversation, is that we got really serious and we saw, we did a lot of things to see progress, and we've seen progress there. I'm looking forward to the progress we're going to see in the years to come. And I'll also be reading to my own child. So I'm going to do everything I can to help us move the needle on this one.
Thank you, Dr. Bovee. Other members? Dr. Davis?
At some point, and I will take up time here, I need somebody to explain to me why the STEP assessment numbers are so different than all the other reading assessment scores. That's for, we can do that later. My other question is, does the legislation mandate the universal screener for the entire state? And if it does not, are we going to see, are you anticipating any pushback from districts who, mainly they're using Dibbles and Acadians. Do you anticipate pushback from the districts about us coming in with a new screener and mandating it across the state? I think we need to, don't get me wrong. You're on a yes vote on that, but I'm just curious about what kind of work are we going to need to do in the districts to convince them that this is the right thing to do?
The legislation, Act 438, does require a single screener identified by the department. You know, honestly, Dr. Davis, I think people are ready for this. I think our school systems are really hungry for all of everything that we've provided so far. They're chomping at the bit to know, you know, what are we doing next year? What is the assessment? How can we get even better data? I think people are, for the most part, really ready and willing to engage in any of this work around literacy improvements. I think we've seen that. I think we see that through our data. We really saw through a super challenging year last year. All of our school systems really step up and say, yes, this is challenging. We need to get through this year. But we can do even better in literacy. And so we saw them, you know, put up some of their own funding for things like literacy coaches, and really step up and make these improvements that were needed. So, thank you.
Ms. Orange-Jones?
Thank you, Dr. Chazon. Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you, Dr. Chazon, for such a rich presentation. Can you just speak a bit to the time horizon? So you have this big, ambitious goal. What do we know about year-over-year anticipated progress? What is an appropriate amount of progress to make in 1 year based on what we've learned from other systems? Like, how will we know? Because the goal is obviously way down the line, and in some ways, maybe exists even beyond the tenure of particular board members, et cetera. So how do we know that we're on track in the next several years?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. The way that we approached even setting this goal was looking at Mississippi, honestly, to see when their legislation began, when it had impact on which cohorts of students. And so we tracked that and backwards mapped ourselves. So their legislation was passed in 2013. And then we really saw their significant NAEP improvements in 2019, right prior to the pandemic. And so you can see that they have some incremental growth on NAEP in that time period, but it's really about tracking those students from kindergarten to that 4th grade NAEP year. And so we set it for 2027, knowing that we should see incremental growth in NAEP up until then, but also recognizing that the full impact would be seen when those kindergarten students make it to 4th grade.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Ellis?
Yeah, I think I was just following up with Dr. Davis. I was concerned about the screener, and then was that in the legislation? And then also, have you guys come to any conclusions on what screener, or has that been determined?
No, so we're still currently in that RFP process to determine what the screener will be.
Other members' comments? I have a couple of questions. If I go back to Dr. Bovey's initial comments about the goal, I just echo her comments. You know, I think messaging is real important here, and the more we get this message out, that we do have this bold goal in front of us, then I think more folks are going to be focused on that and appreciate the boldness of that goal, and look forward to participating in achieving that goal, and the impact that it can have on our state. If I go back to your bar graph, I think it's slide 4 of your presentation, and to show the progress for each grade. And then I go back to the goal that we discussed and the 10 points. I'm a little confused, looking for some help here with helping to connect the dots. If we're ranked 49th now, and we're going to jump to mid-20s, where did the 10 points come in?
So remember that the goal is set on our NAEP results. And so those 10 points come from Mississippi's growth from 2013 to 2019. So when their legislation took effect and had impact in their classrooms from those kindergarten students to 4th grade. So remember, that is why we are setting our goal on NAEP results and not on this particular data, because we talked about, you know, some of the factors, some of the origin of this data, and how, although it, you know, it's data that we want to acknowledge as a state, it's not data that we necessarily want to set our goal on. And so the 10 points come from Mississippi's growth from 2013 to 2019 based on their legislation.
So my interpretation of that is that the 10 points is 10 points on the NAEP scale.
Yes.
And if we gain 10 points on the NAEP scale, then basically we jump 48 to mid-20s.
Somebody-
Is that correct?
Yes, and if we, based on current NAEP rankings, which rankings are a tricky thing to set goals on because everybody's going to be in flux.
Right, but we're going to be better than Mississippi, right?
Well, based on this goal, yes. But it would place us in the high 20s in rankings. So, we can't necessarily say where everyone else will rank,
Understood.
but based on current rankings, that's where we're
Right, right. Okay, so if I go back to your bar graph again, and today we're showing 49% on average, then we're in the 21st century in the United States of America, and 49% of our students read at grade level. That's reality, right? And we set this goal for 2027. Where does that put us on this scale in 2027? What percent of our students will be grade level literate?
That's really comparing apples and oranges, since this is a different assessment. And these are actually, remember this bar graph actually represents
Can you
four.
ballpark me?
I'd have to come back to you on the ballpark, but
Okay. So next question then. What is achievable? I know maybe everybody doesn't get there, right? We're not never going to get to 100%. But what is achievable as a society in this country in the 21st century for literacy for children? What is achievable?
for a goal around literacy?
For achievable, it's the 21st century, all the technology available to us, we're about to send people to Mars, right? What is achievable? I used to work in Europe, kids over there speak 2 or 3 languages. So in this country, we're talking about 49% literacy on the native language. So in your professional opinion, trying to get a feel for what you consider to be achievable.
So as an educator, I'm compelled to believe that all children are capable of reading.
Okay.
And so that's setting a high expectation, setting that bar. And so as an educator, I have to believe that all of our kids are able to achieve.
Okay, so if that's the case, bear with me if you don't mind, one more step. If we say we can get there in 2027, that's 6 years from now, okay? And if I look at the cohort, and I go K or even pre-K, through 4th grade, my understanding is they stop teaching reading in 3rd grade. After that, it's read to learn, right? So bear with me. So if this group of kids goes through the 4 or 5 years of training to learn to read, okay, they've got that kindergarten group that has processed through 5 years. They've got all the training that we can provide. And we're still saying that we're only going to be 25th in the country, and the country's 32nd in the world. So I'm trying to connect the dots again to get back to what is ultimately possible, right, in reality, okay? And then how far can we go in 5 or 6 years, and what's the remaining gap, right? Can you help me out with that? I just really struggle with this concept that 50% of our kids can't read in the native language. It's just, to me, it's unfathomable.
Mr. Morris, what I would jump in and just share here I think Dr. Chasson has already commented that, her desire as an educator is to see every child read, and we believe that. We have put forward what we believe to be a fairly ambitious goal that is modeled after a state that has achieved it, right next door. But I'd also say, like, for us as an administration, this is one of our most significant priorities. Is to make sure that we are doing all that we can do to make sure that kids are on grade level as quickly as possible. And we've used 3rd and 4th grade primarily for those numbers. And the comprehensiveness of what we are doing in literacy is really beyond what Dr. Chasson has been able to share even in the last 20 minutes. We have worked with systems throughout the state to reshape their school days, to make sure that they're carving out the time. We have supported that. We have built out a ton of resources for them to be able to use. We go into schools and teachers are now across the state in weekly collaboration sessions with teacher leaders talking about their student data and making inferences on how to support them in the next week. So for her to be able to say this is or this isn't without, a little time to do that, I just don't think that she can do that, nor could I. But what I will say is I think it's pretty evident that we're doing a significant amount of work in this particular area to drive it forward, because that's what our kids need and deserve.
Thank you, sir. And don't get me wrong, I applaud the progress you guys have made and all the work and everything. It's just, it's just amazing to me, and really are, and what we need to do for our kids. So I really appreciate the work, and thank you again.
Mr. Moore?
Other comments? Mr. Garber?
Yes, I have a question. I may have missed it, so I apologize in advance if I did. We're talking about changing a lot of things to try and improve our NAEP scores. I haven't heard whether or not we need to change our standards so that they align with the NAEP test. Do we need to do that? Is that mentioned in here? Or do we not need to do that?
That hasn't come up. We do have a really, I think, rigorous set of standards for ELA that address all of the different components of reading and writing, so all the different components of literacy. That has not been something questioned as of yet. NAEP is that strong national indicator for reading ability, and there's no reason to question alignment between our standards and the NAEP reading assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Other members come? Just one last one. I think a request, on your marker out, would it be possible to add another bar and show us the translation for the goal relative to the percent of students that are at grade level? So by 2027, right, our goal is to get, pick a number, 70% of our students at grade level. Thank you. Thank you for that dialogue too, by the way. Thank you so much. Members, other comments?
I do. I have another. I was just
Yourself?
thinking, the first year to have growth was this past year. Do we know what contributed to that? How long have any of these things been in place? What might have created this? Because assumingly this would have been a hard year to see that growth. So what happened?
No, I think it's absolutely the focus on efforts, and so I think school systems right away last year began engaging in our professional development series, like I said, that are both live and recorded. We've had hundreds of educators hop on these sessions, learning about the science of reading. This is before they're even digging in to the longer course on the science of reading. Definitely working with school systems to build their local literacy plans. Like Dr. Brumley talked about, we've done a lot of work in them carving out time in their day for core instruction, for interventions, us really highlighting resources that should be used during those times. So we began really building out what we call our literacy library during the last school year and communicating with systems about the resources there. And it looks a lot different at this point this year than it did at this point last year. There's a lot more in there, but as soon as we began producing materials and guidance, school systems just scooped everything up and began implementing and using it right away. Everyone was really eager to make literacy improvements in their schools, and that's why I believe we see these initial gains.
Was there any shift in curriculum decisions that you can point out?
No shift in curriculum decisions. I think one thing, another thing I think to highlight would be the literacy coaches. Having literacy coaches in place last year absolutely made a difference in supporting our teachers.
Ms. Ellis, I want to also say, like, our school days, just for most schools, they look a little different than they looked a few years ago because of the way they're scheduling their day. Previously, if you would have walked into an elementary school and said, show me a second grade schedule, it would have said, this time to this time math, this time to this time English. But now you have carve-outs for intervention, you have carve-outs for high-dosage tutoring, you have carve-outs for collaboration led by teacher leaders. All this stuff matters. And it's really affirming for us, like whenever we do school visits, to now see it and see it happening because we know that it makes a difference. One of the things Dr. Chasson did mention is we've built out some high-quality, what we call our accelerate resources, which are for that high-dosage tutoring. They're grab and go, essentially. It do not take much preparation on the teacher's part, and we know those are being used. And so we're trying to stay ahead of our teachers to produce documents and resources in front of them so that they're not having to do that at the system level, and we can ensure that we have high quality resources, not something that they're going and grabbing off the internet to try to use. So we're trying to do that. And then two, we've had significant buy-in from traditional systems, from our public charter partners, and from our non-publics. Like, for the most part, everybody wants to be part of doing better here. And that also, I think, will be part of us getting to that goal, is the fact that most systems and most schools want to be part of this.
I would posit also that our summer learning programs were a factor here. This assessment data was taken at some point in the fall semester, depending on the school system and the hurricanes. So I think summer learning programs really helped gain additional valuable instructional time for some of our learners who probably needed it the most this past summer. So I would assume that our summer learning programs had an impact on this data as well. Thank you.
But to Dr. Bothy's point too, what else can this board do? Anything that we can do. I mean, we're going to have minimum impact if we don't have a high quality teacher in every classroom. You know, we can have all of this ready to go and lined out and have it comprehensive, but if we don't have quality teachers in every classroom, we're not going to get the impact that we need. And so, policy and practices and legislation that help us ensure that we have a high quality teacher with every child is paramount, because we're not going to see the results that we're calling out for unless we can likewise ensure that the classrooms are staffed appropriately.
Great comments, Susan, too. Thank you. Members, other comments, other thoughts on this one? All right, hearing none, is there any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion passes. Next item, please.
The next item is on page 146, item 3.2, consideration of an update report regarding the preliminary findings of the ACT Alignment Study. Department recommendations to receive the report.
Motion, please. President Holloway, Dr. Davis, thank you. Superintendent?
Yes, sir. We'll keep Dr. Chasson at the table for a little while. One of the things that our team wanted to do, and we know that we heard from this board that was also important likewise for this board, is to just look at what might be going on with ACT scores throughout the state. You know, that we have seen over the last several years, in the same way that over the last several years we've seen declines in literacy levels, we've likewise seen declines in ACT scores. And so we want to do a little bit of a deeper dive on this that's beyond anecdotal talking points. And so what we have for you today is a preliminary report on findings from the work that has taken place at LSU with our partners there. And we will come back with a more comprehensive report, but we wanted just to give you a sense of where things stand as of today. Dr. Chasson.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Brumley. So today I'm happy to present to you all some of the preliminary findings of our ACT Alignment Study. We've had some really fruitful conversations around ACT at several previous board meetings that really called into question the alignment between our Louisiana student standards and the ACT. And so this ACT Alignment Study has looked to really address some of those questions. We partnered with LSU's Educational Research Department on this study, and they've been really great partners in working through this with us throughout the fall semester. I want to just let you all know that these are really preliminary findings. This is in no way the entirety of the report that is to come. This is just an update for this month. They're a part of that larger report that is still in draft, and it will certainly be provided to you all once it is finalized. So I just wanted to bring an overview to you all today and some of our first identified next steps. So just an overview of the purpose of this study. We know that ACT was adopted as a measure of college and career readiness here in our state in 2013. And we know that the ACT test covers 4 academic skill areas: English, mathematics, reading, and science. And this alignment study specifically addresses the correspondence of the Louisiana student standards and the ACT college and career readiness standards. And this study did look at kindergarten through 12th grade Louisiana student standards. We were really thrilled to have some very highly skilled and capable panel members participate in this study. The review panel consisted of 45 Louisiana educators. Panel members were selected and divided into 3 sub-panels: English language arts, math, and science. Panel members were highly trained content experts in their discipline, some of them classroom teachers, curriculum specialists. They were selected to the extent possible to represent the geographic, socioeconomic, ethnic, racial, and gender diversity of the state. And the panels consisted of individuals with experience educated, our English language learners, and our students with special needs. So we really had some wonderful experts participating in these panels. They engaged in 5 tasks. The first of which to identify the emphasis given to the ACT College and Career Readiness Standards in local instruction. They worked towards matching the ACT standards and the Louisiana student standards to depth of knowledge levels. They reviewed the ACT standards for their degree of alignment to the Louisiana student standards. And they reviewed items on 3 forms of the released ACT and evaluated their alignment to Louisiana student standards. They also completed an overall evaluation of the alignment. Next, I'll walk through each subject area and their major findings. So for each of these, you'll see an emphasis given in local instruction. And that refers to how much time is spent on each standard in local instruction. So remember, these experts were curriculum and content specialists, classroom teachers, and so they evaluated how much focus and time is given to these standards in classrooms based on their own knowledge. Standard alignment refers to the match between the ACT College and Career Readiness Standards and our Louisiana student standards. When you see the term partial match, which is mostly what we saw, that there was some direct matches and some partial matches, a partial match means that the ACT standard is partially included in the Louisiana student standard, or the two have some degree of agreement or overlap, but there is not an exact match. The best example I can give you all of this is in our English standards and in the ACT English standards. Our standards use the words revise to improve. So it's asking students to revise to improve, while the ACT standard says deletion of irrelevant material. And so you can see that the two require very similar skills of students, but they are a little different. And that's when you see that partial match was identified by the panel participants. The last item that you see here is the item alignment. So this is the panelists looked at the ACT items, the released ACT items, and compared those to our Louisiana student standards. And an exact content match would mean that the item perfectly captures the core ideas of the standards, and a partial match would mean that there was incomplete coverage of the core ideas of the standards. So for English, we saw for emphasis given in local instruction that there's a frequent instructional focus on standards with a lower level of rigor and an infrequent focus on the more challenging standards. So in other words, easier material covered by the English subtest is taught more frequently than the more challenging items or standards. So the panelists identified that they are spending time teaching the standards that align, but they're spending more time on some of the easier item types and less time on some of the more challenging item types during classroom instruction. For standard alignment for English, they identified that the majority of standards were at least partially matched. And for item alignment, they identified that items on the ACT are aligned with Louisiana student standards, but the coverage was typically partial and not a complete match, like I gave that example a few minutes ago. For reading, this was the area, the subtest area that had the greatest amount of match and then the greatest alignment. So for emphasis given in local instruction, the participants identified that it was frequent, that the material is taught that addresses the ACT standards on a frequent and ongoing basis. Excuse me one moment. It's a lot of talking. So for reading, the panelists concluded that the material is taught that addresses the ACT standards on a frequent and ongoing basis, and the majority of the ACT standards are aligned to the Louisiana student standards. They did find that the items on the ACT are aligned to our standards, even though at times the coverage is partial and not a complete match. For mathematics, the participants identified that the emphasis given in local instruction was frequent, that they do regularly teach material that addresses the ACT. And for standard alignment, they identified the majority of ACT standards are aligned to our standards, and that for item alignments, the coverage is typically partial and not a complete match. Science was a difficult area to evaluate for alignment, and the participants found a moderate degree of instructional focus, and only moderate amounts of time were spent on standards with the highest alignment to ACT. The challenge that they identified was that ACT standards are written at high levels and are more general in nature than the Louisiana student standards that tend to be more specific at times. I captured a participant comment at the bottom that I think helps to understand the degree of alignment for science. They said that this isn't a fault of the standards. The ACT science section isn't meant to line up with content. It is meant to line up with the science skills that are learned throughout middle and high school. These are some additional comments from the panelists. Really just highlighting that alignment is apparent and was able to be identified the majority of the time, but just acknowledging that additional work and research is needed. So the overall conclusion is that the alignment between the ACT standards and our Louisiana standards overall is good. We have better alignment in some content areas than others, but we've had a lot of challenges that were also recognized. So although alignment between the standards exists, we know that there are still challenges that are ultimately resulting in our students not being fully prepared to take the ACT. One of these is we know our high school educators are preparing for multiple high school assessments, and that creates a strain on valuable instructional time. We also know that we have an opportunity moving forward to do additional research and development. One of which is as we begin looking at our next generation assessment framework, this is a time for us to use the results of this study and really take into account where we are headed in our next generation of assessments. We can also use the results of this full study when it is finalized on future standards revision processes. We should also examine our course progression for high school. But for all of these things, we have both short and long-term approaches in the aftermath of this study. We know that we...
Let me take the next steps.
Yeah.
So the next steps, we're going to engage in a series of in-depth working group meetings with the LSU research team to further the research and development. On the research side, we want to look at practices of states that have a high percentage of students that take ACT and having higher ACT average in Louisiana. And I can tell you we've already been looking at a few states that have similar demographics but have higher performance. Practices of schools and school systems in Louisiana that have high ACT averages, and examining how preparedness for ACT can be incorporated into everyday core instruction versus simply in isolation. And on the development side, professional learning for delivery at the upcoming Teacher Leader Summit, where we will also be, as you know, focusing on our literacy efforts. And then instructional materials and guidance to address specific ACT standards with low levels of alignment. So we know as a result of the study some of the areas where we need stronger alignment, and so we'll be providing essentially supplemental materials and guidance to support in those particular areas. And this is just a statement from the professor at LSU, and we can move on. But basically, it's just saying that, you know, we place priority here on our standards. The study shows that we do have alignment overall, but there are areas where we can improve, not just with the standards, but also with implementation at the classroom level, and additional support and resources that we also intend to provide. That concludes our presentation. Good job, Dr. Chess, on your truth.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cromie, and super thanks to Dr. Chase. Thank you so much. Any members, other comments before we close this one? Superintendent Roche?
Yeah, I want to thank you for the beginning of this study, and I think it's something that we kind of know. The standards themselves, I don't think need revision. I mean, the standards are general enough. It points to what kids are expected to do. I think when we look at the alignment of standards, curriculum, and assessment, I think that's where the work needs to be. That the assessment piece that we're looking at has to line up with the standard and the curriculum we use. And I'm going to try to do this in a short, I guess as short as I can. State of Louisiana in our legislature has set the ACT as pretty much the gold standard for our students when it comes to scholarships, top university scholarships and such. So we have to make sure that our kids are prepared for the ACT because it needs a great deal. It's going to be an assessment of their learning over a period of time, but it has a very strong impact on students and their families as well. So our standards are such, I think, that are set up that we are addressing the concepts needed. But I think in many cases our assessments are not always aligned or complete enough to include what is being assessed, not only our statewide assessments, but the ACT. For example, in ELA, we have a heavy emphasis on reading and reading comprehension, and our kids can take a passage and go ahead and prepare and try to do all the things we ask them to do. And I really think that's one of the reasons we're seeing a little bit of an increase in the reading section of the ACT. Am I correct with that? Statewide on a reading piece. But when you look at the ELA, for example, in terms of grammar and English language development, what our kids see when they take that ACT is not what they see when they take our assessments. So while we can incorporate that into what we teach, if we don't assess it and make it important, it doesn't get internalized. And I don't mean just a prep course when they're ready to take it as a 10th, 11th, 12th grader, but all the way from the beginning down to the K-12 vertical alignment, that as we are assessing our students, I think we need to keep this assessment in mind as well as the other assessments we expect our kids to take. So I would like to see it, because when I'm reading their study, I don't think it's the standards that are, and I hate to use the word problem, that are not aligned, but more so how we teach it and how we assess it. And maybe if we can get that a little bit closer, our kids are going to be used to that, and you know how to say what the teachers will be.
Dr. Volkey?
So, we had a conversation earlier, last conversation was about reading. And I think everybody in the room can agree that all kids need to learn how to read. That we're not going to debate, right? My input on this is that the ACT is a tool, but it's not the North Star. And I just want, I'm comfortable with everything that's in here. You know, all the next steps, I'm comfortable with all those things. But I just want to make it known that in my mind, the ACT is a tool, but it's not the North Star. Like, I don't wake up every day and say, I want my kid to do great on the ACT, you know? I do want him to do well on the ACT. I want him to have opportunities to do well on the ACT, but it's not the North Star. So I just want to make sure that as we take our next steps with this approach, that we keep those things in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Volkey. Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, so I'll also try and keep it short, but I just have one quick question regarding the ACT English subtest. How do you identify which items are considered more rigorous or challenging in comparison to others? Because every student can look at it differently.
So that was when the panelists looked, they did a match to the depth of knowledge. So some of our standards do match up to a higher depth of knowledge, a higher level of cognition. So there are varying levels of rigor. And there was a depth of knowledge matrix that they were able to match up against to identify what students were being asked to do. So for example, to just ask you to recall something, to just remember something, would be at a lower depth of knowledge than when we're asking you to do something that causes you to have to analyze information and dig more deeply into it. So that's what that means.
So when teachers are offered source materials used in the classroom in ACT prep, are those items identified to them as more challenging? Do the teachers know, hey, this is a more difficult question? Or is there a way we can identify that when they're given material?
There is a way that we can. I think it would depend on the teacher and what set of resources and materials that teacher is using.
Thank you.
Other members? Ms. Ellis?
Yeah, can you refresh my memory on why did we start this study? Are we looking to change assessments or aligning? Like, what was the catalyst behind it?
So we did have a lot of questions, some from you all, some from other stakeholders about the level of alignment between our Louisiana standards and the ACT. So I see this, and I told Superintendent Boche this throughout several conversations, this is one step in a line of short and long-term approaches. So whether that feeds into some of our ongoing standards revision processes, whether it feeds into us looking at our next generation assessment framework, there are ways that we'll be able to utilize this study. It is a much larger and more comprehensive study than what I was able to present today with these preliminary findings, but it will give us, I think, a lot of really good information to drive those other processes.
What's the final goal? Do we know? Are we really just going to take this information and then make some recommendations down the road? Because I think we had talked about pulling out or changing some of our LEAP exams in high school, maybe aligning to an ACT. And I think that was kind of why we started talking this talk. You know, I think as an educator, speaking with some senior English teachers and then just seeing how there's a new trend away from even needing an ACT to get into colleges, it concerns me that maybe, you know, there's some shifts that have happened even in the last year since we started this conversation around, is the ACT the North Star? As Ms. Bowie mentioned, is it really, you know, I see the scholarship opportunities and alignment, all of that makes sense. It's just another conversation around, you know, what's the trend with universities and requirements to get in with ACT?
Ms. Ellis, just a point on that. We were having this board and educators, we were having the conversation around challenges with ACT because of the consistent declines. And I think when the latest round of ACT scores came out and it sparked wants to end the conversation, what's going on? And so for me, I mean, I agree, it's not necessarily the North Star test, but for me, it's a barrier of access right now for some of our students, because if they don't have a certain score, they can't get to the college of their choice, or they can't get to college if that's their desire. And then the barrier around scholarships, particularly in Louisiana times. So, you know, I agree it's not that North Star because of what it assesses, but I just believe we have to put our positions in a better position. I mean, we have to put our students in better positions to be successful in this as our work with educators. And if there are ways that we can learn through the process that we can do that without giving up North Star, knowledge of content, et cetera, then we should try to do that.
No, I agree.
George Jones?
This is a very rich discussion, and some of what I was going to raise has been addressed by Ms. Ellis and Dr. Brumley, but I did want to come back to Dr. Bovee, your earlier point about the ACT not being the North Star. I just, you know, Dr. Brumley, what you just said has been my overall orientation, like this is about access, right? And this, obviously, this particular exam sort of creates certain access points that become very important in changing the life trajectories of students, especially students who are the most vulnerable, right? But I thought that your point was compelling, Dr. Bovee, and I was wondering if you'd say a sentence or two more about it. So what are the limitations to it being the North Star, in your view?
It's not the ultimate goal, right? Like, I think it's a tool, but it measures, my understanding is that it measures or predicts how well a student is going to do in college. So I think that's good information, but that's not ultimately what we're trying to achieve with our students. So what we're trying to achieve with our students is that they graduate from high school with knowledge and skills that will help them be successful with the next stage in life. And I think, you know, it's important for me to articulate this because kind of what Ms. Ellis is alluding to, I would be concerned about us putting all of our eggs in one basket, right? What I think is strong about our high school accountability system is it incentivizes a portfolio of things that we would want people to pursue and support in our children, not just one thing, right? What I don't want is for our high schools to only focus on ACT, because I don't think it represents all of what we want our students to know and be able to do when they graduate. Now, the conversation that we're having about it being a barrier for some students, I think is something we absolutely need to pursue. And I'm comfortable with that. And I think we need to have these conversations, and I support that work. I just want to be careful that we don't like overcompensate and then have our high schools focus solely on one thing. Our high schools shouldn't be about one test. There's so much more that our students need.
I appreciate you clarifying.
Other members? Ms. Ellis?
I mentioned this too. I have a wonderful educator in my previous high school. I was assistant principal in, and she also teaches ACT prep, so she's very immersed in the ACT world, but is also a senior English teacher. And in speaking with her, I thought one of her first comments would be, absolutely, we need to do more aligning for ACT. And her first instinct was, no, this is a college readiness exam. It's a snapshot in time. You know, when she looks at her senior English students, her goal is to prepare them for many other things, many other things, especially from a writing perspective. And I think that, you know, it's concerning with the ACT. We don't even look, you know, that's not even, I would say, a respected tool from the ACT. We don't even look at the writing portion. And so there's just a lot to talk about here, and I think from an access perspective, I totally agree, and we need to be doing more. And then my concern with universities pulling away from even requiring the ACT, there's a lot to talk about, I think, and that could maybe be continued in your discussions.
Mr. Garvey?
Yes, may go unsaid, or not need to be asked, but let me ask it anyway. If we do end up changing standards, wouldn't that require us to change our LEAP test and other tests in order to line up with those standards?
Yes,
So you're
our state
anticipating that
assessments are
issue.
aligned to our state standards.
And if we go in reverse, as Ms. Bonche was talking about, maybe changing our test in order to align the test more with our LEAP tests, to align them more with the ACT, would that require us to change our standards to match the changes in the test?
It would depend to what degree we were. I think it would depend on the degree to which our state assessments were altered.
But it would be an issue you would definitely be keeping an eye on, whether or not we would need to change the standards if we change the test.
Mr. Garvey, that's what I was coming up here to remind you. I don't think you mentioned that we review our standards every 7 years. And believe it or not, we're coming up on that 7 years now. So we are going to be looking, not we, the board, will be looking at revising those standards if the LBE makes any recommendations.
But are you talking about LEA?
ELA and math,
ELA.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One more question, because we had such a rich conversation about NAEP and improving our standing over the next decade. In this study, and I know the purpose of the study was aligned, and so perhaps we didn't get to that, and I noticed that one of the things we were going to be looking at going forward was other states, ACT, where growth in ACT has happened. I'm just curious about the correlation between overall positioning in ratings and ACT. So is there a clear correlation? So states that do better, who are higher ranked, do they also have higher ACT averages generally, sometimes, all the time? I'm just trying to understand the correlation between overall state rankings and the ACT specifically.
And you were asking about correlation between NAEP and ACT?
Exactly.
Yeah, I'll have to get that for you, Ms. Orenstone, so I'm sure that's something we can look into. I'll say that one of the things that we're already exploring and was stated as a next step in this report was looking towards other states who also have a high percentage of their students who take the assessment, because those are really the states that we want to be looking towards, who have a higher overall average than us. Some of those states look a whole lot like our state and others don't. But two in particular to call out is looking at both Alabama and Arkansas, because they both test a large group of their student population as we do, and they both have higher overall averages on ACT. So those are some next steps in the research, is a plan to dig in on those states and their practices around ACT.
Okay, thank you for that.
Other comments? Superintendent O'Shea?
Okay, as an educator, I don't believe that there is any single test that should be the gold standard, the North Star, whatever we want to call it. But I think what we have created in an accountability system is something similar to that, whether it be our statewide assessments, whether it's our ACT. When we're looking right now, I know that there is a group looking at the accountability. And when we look at the high school, I think we have to recognize that we do have a different, or we should be having a different vision for our high schools in terms of how we prepare students and what we prepare them for. So I would hope this discussion would continue within that particular group as well to see, are we going to continue with the emphasis maybe that we do have on the ACT. But that's a collaborative effort. While some colleges and universities may be lessening the importance of either the ACT or the SAT, we here in Louisiana would have to do that, I think, if that is our intention, in a collaborative effort with our legislature and all of our educational stakeholders to make sure that we are not hurting children or creating barriers for kids fail school on it. So it is a very, to me, complex situation. As long as we continue to have the ACT as an important part of our accountability measure and our scholarship granting program here in Louisiana, I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure for our families that we are preparing our students for it as best we can. Now, if we change that goal, if that is not going to be the criteria for scholarships in Louisiana or the basis on how we evaluate our programs as a whole story, the office, I think, needs to be done in a very collaborative effort. But as long as it is in place, I think we need to continue studies like y'all have begun to make sure that we are preparing our students to show the best they can on this assessment because it is so meaningful to them in their tenures.
Thanks, to negotiate. Other comments, members? I had a two-part question. Part one is from Mr. Johnson, and part two is for Superintendent Brown. Mr. Johnson, I'm interested in, as a student, what kind of, remind us what grade you're in, and then what kind of preparation have you had for the ACT?
So I'm a senior, and I would say, so my English teacher, I actually had her my freshman and sophomore year as well. And I know I've been focusing on English primarily in regards to my question earlier, but one thing that she did that was really helpful for me in preparation for the ACT English test, she did bell ringers every day. And we'd walk into class and we would answer just two, 3 or 4 questions from the ACT. And getting that in my mind every day, reading those types of questions helped me develop, so hear my mind towards, these are the type of questions I will be answering, not necessarily the questions that she had already tested, not but then also, during quarantine, I did read several ACT test help books, and that helped me personally. I was probably the only kid in Louisiana doing that during quarantine.
We appreciate you going above and beyond. Could you help me out a little bit more with regard to what maybe most students are doing with regard to formal study or formal preparation that the state offers for students to prepare?
It really is more cramming for the test. As of now, it's either I'm going to buy a book that I found of some sort to prepare myself for the test, or we have an AP club at my school, and we have students who have performed well on the ACT. We actually have an ACT 30 plus club, and they go and tutor to the younger classes and help them prepare periodically throughout the year. And that has seemed to be very beneficial the last couple of school years. We started doing that. As far as statewide, I'm not 100% certain outside of my given district what schools are doing, but I think more attention has been drawn to ACT prep in recent years. I think it's greatly improved from when I was in middle school. I would hear from older friends, older people I knew in the community, and the level of focus that was put on it at that time is not nearly as great as it is now. So I think it has improved. I think we've been making the right steps going forward. So does that help you?
Sir, thank you for sharing your personal experience.
Is there anything else you'd like me to?
Okay, I'm gonna move to part 2 of my question and go to the superintendent. Superintendent Brown, could you add to Mr. Johnson's comments and help the board to appreciate what's in place right now for our students to prepare for the ACT? And then what does that look like in your view, let's say, in the next 2 years?
I think that's going to be different system to system. One of the things that gets us fairly nervous is whenever we hear people talking specifically around ACT prep. We don't necessarily believe ACT prep is the answer to making sure our students are graduating with the knowledge that they need to be successful. We believe that could be a part of the puzzle. the ACT prep should not be the way that we are approaching a resolve to get more kids access to ACT alone. I think the work that's happening here with the study is important. You know, I think it called out the fact that our standards are solid, but there are areas where we probably need to give additional attention. One of the things that we want to do at answering very specifically is that we believe that there are places where there are weaknesses potentially, or in terms of implementation of a standard or the standard itself. That's, and I don't mean weakness in and of itself, I mean weakness in terms of the ACT. But we want to make sure that we're providing systems and features, additional resources around those particular areas so that they can be successful. But as we get more into the actual study, remember this is just a preliminary report, we'll be in a better position to answer your question.
I guess my line of thought was just going to Dr. Kennedy's comment, and to his view, the standards are pretty aligned, but the real work to do is prepare the students for the test.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think there's been good conversation around overall preparation of our students and how we have competing interests. But we do want to make sure at minimum that we are doing everything we can to remove barriers for access. And right now we know we have barriers for access because of students not being successful as they need to be on ACT. And we've seen over the last 2 years that continues to decline.
Thank you. And when will we expect the final formal report?
I think it's, is it March?
Mr. Jones, you got something to add?
Yeah, just one more thing. I would say in terms of preparation, it's been geared more towards testing prep and testing tricks rather than content intake. And that goes to what Dr. Goki said earlier. The North Star is not the ACT, or even if it is now, that should not be the end goal. The end goal should be giving them the knowledge that they need to succeed later in life. And I feel like the preparation is not geared towards the content of the ACT rather than how do I answer this question, how do I read the passage, how do I move without the test.
Thank you for sharing that. Other comments, members? All right, hearing none, any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion passes. Next item, please.
The next item is on page 154, item 3.3, consideration of a waiver request for the Special School District regarding policy contained in Bulletin 111, the Louisiana School District and State Accountability System, submitted by the State Superintendent of Education. The department recommendation is to approve the SSD appeal with contingencies.
We get a motion.
So moved.
Dr. Bovee, and second. Dr. Davis, thank you. Superintendent?
No comment.
No comment. No comment. Are members any comments on this one? Dr. Bovee?
I have a question about this one. So I guess my question is more around how their school calculation is done, because my understanding was that our special school was a combined school, but as I'm reading the back of it, it's leading me to believe that the calculation is separated.
Yeah, I'll ask Mr. Lambert to come up on this particular.
Okay.
So the way that a combination score is calculated is we calculate two separate school performance scores, a K-8 and a 9-12, and then it's a weighted average of those two scores based off the testing units. So we calculate a K-8 and then a high school, and then weighted average them together.
And that's the school performance score for the special schools. Okay.
For any combination school, so if they have any number of middle school to high school, anything that crosses the 8 to 9 threshold.
You would do separate calculations and then calculate together. Okay. I guess the question I'm seeing is if I'm reading the rationale and it's saying they serve 63 students and then only talk about the students who are visually impaired.
It is the school for visually impaired.
Okay.
LSVI.
Okay. And so the calculations for LSVI are different than so we have a separation of the schools. I thought they were all in one. I didn't realize it was.
There are multiple sites. There are multiple sites, and what they are asking for us to do here is essentially allow them to use their graduation data.
Okay.
if you do not have 10 students in your cohort, we exclude graduation data.
Yeah.
They have fewer regularly, and they have just requested that we include it in order to make sure that there's no gaming opportunity based off whether they like their graduation rate or not for a given year.
Is why you put in the,
The 5-year request that it stay for 5.
yeah, and I think, I support it, I just didn't realize, the level of detail there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brophy. Members of the comments? Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion passes. I'd like to see if we get some interest from the board to move item 6.2 up, given the level of interest in that item and the folks in the room that are here to speak to that. Can I get a motion to move item 6.2 up? Ms. Holloway, Ms. Monticello, the second. Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion passes.
The next item is on page 173, item 6.2, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 139, Louisiana Child Care and Development Fund programs regarding the Child Care Assistance Program. The department recommendation is to approve revisions to Bulletin 139 as emergency rule for a period of 180 days or until adopted as final rule and as notice of intent.
Okay, a motion, President Holloway. Ms. Monticello, second. Thank you. Superintendent.
Yes, sir. This item is actually coming to you from one of the early care task force, one of our groups that we convene around early care. It is not just about, we have to be concerned about a couple things when we're thinking about early child care in the state of Louisiana. We have to be concerned about making sure that we have quantity of seats, and that means quantity of seats, availability of seats for families who are have certain financial needs, but also making sure that we have seats for families maybe where both parents go to work and they need good child care during the course of the day. So we have to make sure that we have quantity of seats. And the other thing that we have to work to ensure running parallel is that we have quality seats. And we're making improvements on the quality of seats, as indicated, as Mr. Morris shared earlier with the reviews from some of the class observations. One of the challenges right now in the industry, in the early care industry, is their ability to maintain staff. Particularly, staff are accepting positions at other places within the community, whether it's some of the retail stores or some of the other industries, because the child care directors are unable to provide salary and benefits to keep those individuals there employed with the children. And so this is simply a recommendation based on the work of various commissions, but also in working with a couple of different economists and making some projections on what would be necessary to move closer to the true cost of care for what it takes to actually take care of children or early care centers. And so just we are bringing this recommendation forward, but as we have also shared, and we also have to acknowledge, there's also always a potential that if you are increasing what you are paying out per child, if there's not a corresponding increase in dollars that are going into that pot, then you could reduce the number of children that you serve. And so it's a balance of how do we make determinations to ensure that we actually have an industry remaining to provide the service, but ensuring that we can continue to support children. And so this is a recommendation coming forward today, and we have staff that's got any particular questions. And I know that it appears that we have a host of providers that can tell the story much better than I can.
Thank you, Superintendent. Before we get to the public comment, members, any comment? Mr. Garvey?
Yes. As the superintendent mentioned, there's a balancing act here, trying to get the price right, figure right. It may require future funding that we don't know if it will exist or not. I want to point out, if I understand it right, that if in the future there is a lack of adherence of funding that's needed to cover this, we could adjust the figure of price again to try and rebalance with that new information in mind. So, just wanted to share that. We've done it before. change this price. It's not the first time we're changing this price.
Thank you, Mr. Garvey. Members, other comments? Okay, as Superintendent Brumley noted, there's a lot of interest in this item. I've got at least 17 comment cards here for folks that wish to speak. So just remind everyone that you're speaking for yourself. We're allowing 3 minutes, and if you speak for an organization, you're allowed 5 minutes. But I just encourage you to pay attention to other folks' comments and let's not be redundant with our comments, and yet let's stay focused and add value to the conversation. So having said that, I'd like to get started. I've got Ms. Christie Gibbons, if you could come to the table, followed by Monique, Roger, and Brittany McFarland on deck. If we could get Ms. Kim Sitmore to the table as well. Thank you. Please identify yourself and the organization represented. Thank you.
Okay. First, I didn't expect to be the first person. But good morning, good morning or good afternoon. My name is Christie Gibbons. I'm a veteran educator and social worker for over 22 years in childcare. I'm proud owner and executive director of 3 high-quality childcare centers. They are NAEYC accredited, and we also hold 4-star ratings with Louisiana Department of Education. The Child Care Assistance Program has been a blessing for my organization to keep my doors open to provide minimum standards for the families we serve. My vision was always to provide high-quality service to our families, so I spent a lot of money, which put me in debt, but never enough money to get me out of the race. So I decided to build relationships within my community and started receiving additional funding from other partnerships. My child care centers have early Head Start programs for over 10 years, City Seats program, B3 programs, which pay me the tuition of what we're requesting today. And they have supported my centers tremendously. I offer a wonderful ratio, teachers with minimum CPA associate's degree, bachelor's degree, livable wages, early screening for each child, allowing us to send more children to school ready to learn. Professional development training each month with at least 7 hours of training each month. Parent involvement each month. Abundance of supplies and materials for classrooms and gorgeous outdoor playgrounds. Top curriculum and training to offer staff to be able to implement curriculum and teacher strategies. Optimal development such as social and emotional skills, academic skills, health, nutrition meals, brain development, reduce obesity, increase vocabulary, early screening, giving each child ability to go to school ready for kindergarten upon arrival. Even though I have been blessed to receive so many partnerships, majority of child care centers do not have these opportunities. So I believe increase in child care funding and increase additional eligibility will help make child care centers reach these goals. Today I sit throughout this meeting since 9 a.m. and heard people on the panel talk about many concerns in our school system. What is our plan to get the results like Mississippi and other states? I do have a solution. We need to invest in early childhood funding in our child care system program so we can build high quality within our state throughout all child care programs. We have to stop believing we can get results with minimum funding. So I ask to support recommendations for this increased funding and eligibility and let's close achievement gap. And I just want to take a minute to talk about, I have so many stories I can talk about.
Ms. Gibbons, please.
Oh, okay.
All
right.
Appreciate your passion.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing. Ms. Roger, did I get that right? Rouge?
Yes.
Ms. Rouge, you're on, please identify yourself and your organization.
Thank you for giving us this opportunity to speak. So just to counteract with one of my partners stated so eloquently, I just want to keep in perspective the points on why we need this increase and why it's so important. One, the increase helps to maintain quality centers. As she already stated, we have quality centers and all of the people that's in the back that's representing this cause also has the same. It actually helps us to provide access to our most vulnerable children, our most vulnerable population. So it's a need. It keeps the small businesses, as mine and as the ladies in the back, viable. It keeps us to help the workforce and to continue to invest in the economy. This initiative also helps to decrease the pipelines in prison. We all know, we see the news, and we know what happens every day. When children have an early child care opportunity and advantage, it decreases those chances. We know, for one, that it's certain that we're going to invest. How we invest is with the initiative. We can either invest early with our early children, or we can invest later into the incarceration system. So what we're projecting is that we invest early, that we invest in our staff so that we can have a competitive wage, a livable wage. Most of our staff that work for us are in poverty as well. So this is heart-wrenching because we do this work every day. So the fact that we want, and just as Christie was listening, I was listening as well, ACT scores, a viable secondary education, it starts with early. The brain development starts inside the womb. So because of these things, it's important that we realize the investment is now. If we care about our children, then we have to fund the children. We have to fund these programs. Quality is not free. Quality costs. All of the things that we state, that we have in our sites, it costs money to provide these things. And all children, not some, all children need this opportunity. Just like children need the opportunity to go to secondary education, they need the opportunity to come to a quality site, to have credentialed teachers, teachers that have a livable wage, centers that offer benefits, and families that have a secure and safe environment for their children so they can be in the workforce. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ruth. Thank you for the comment.
Ms. Morris, just a point of information, I just want to be clear. It seems that there is great interest in support of this motion by the board, and I'm happy to hear everybody's testimony, but if there is no opposition, I was wondering if there was a way to perhaps get to the question. If there is no opposition, I don't know if there is or isn't.
Would you like to put that before the board at this point?
Unless there's any real burning desire, if we're in support of it, for folks to speak, I'd like to call the question if there is no opposition.
Okay, so let's ask the members, is there any objection to the motion? I don't see any objection. So I guess what we would do is we would share with those who submitted a card to speak.
Note everyone will still be in the record as being in support.
Right. So again, for the public attending, you've heard the comments from the board. There is no objection to the motion. You have submitted a card to speak, and we want to provide you that opportunity. So if you would still like to speak, we welcome your comments. But after hearing the position of the board, if that satisfies your concerns and you no longer wish to speak, then whenever I call your name, just let me know and we'll progress through. But we certainly want to give everyone an opportunity that would like to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Morris.
Okay, so we've got Ms. McFarland,
Yes.
would you like to speak, or?
I am Brittany McFarlane from C Academy in New Orleans East, and I just wanted to get up and speak and say, because I've grown up in New Orleans East and I live in New Orleans East, now since the end of 2019, we have had over 233 carjackings in the ages between 12 and 15. And like my partner said, that it starts with early care. If we don't have quality early care and the opportunity to have these kids come to these places and see these things, we'll still have those car jackets going into 2022. So we appreciate your support and we thank y'all for allowing us to come to these things here.
Thank you for coming up to speak to us. Ms. Sitmore, would you still like to speak?
No,
You're okay? All right. I've got Ellen Dumas. Ms. Dumas.
I'm fine.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Holloway, Tessa Holloway. Ms. Holloway, are you okay? Okay, thank you. I've got Joy Mitchell.
I'm fine.
Thank you, ma'am. Really appreciate you folks coming out today. I've got Bob Lansing, Mr. Lansing. Okay, thank you, sir. I've got Ms. Polito, Paula Polito. Thank you, ma'am. Next one I have is Megan Garrettson, Ms. Garrettson. Please identify yourself as all organizations members.
I just want to thank you all for allowing our voices to be heard. I know that our presence is powerful. I just wanted to reiterate the fact that you guys have also stated that it starts with quality in the classroom, and to achieve these goals that everyone wants in the school system and recognizes that it starts from birth to the age of 5. It's our earliest learners that we've got to get to press them, to help you guys, to have them ready when they go to kindergarten. That quality starts in the classroom, and our teachers who are working day in and day out, 12-hour shifts around the clock. We don't close for the summer. We don't close for holidays. We provide a service so that our families can go to work. Our teachers that work for us are in poverty. They make about $12 an hour, and they need these increases to support their own families so that we can expect their expectations to provide quality for all families that come through our doors. So this is very important to us, and I want to make sure that you guys know that people who are doing this work and on the front lines, they're in poverty too, and it doesn't end here. This is a start, but in early childhood education, we need funding. Thank you.
Next one I have is Ms. Tara Emery. Ms. Emery.
I'll wait, thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Cindy Bishop.
I'll wait, but thank you so much for your support, we appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Next one I have is Ruth Ann Oakey Frost.
I'll wait, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next one I have is Mr. Derek Toots.
Good morning, and thank you for your support of this. I want to acknowledge all of the providers that we have in the room. It's a tremendous honor to share the room with them, people that are doing the work on the front line. So my name is Derek Toots. I'm speaking on behalf of Agenda for Children, and we have a state contract and receive a number of state grants. I'm not here to support or oppose this, but rather to provide some information. And this is more so, maybe not for the board, it's probably information that you know, but for anyone else in the room who might need some context on why this is such an important piece or important vote today. So this increase in CCAP rates is a very significant public investment in the compensation and retention of early childhood educators, as well as in the long-term stability of the early childhood workforce in our state. Last year, a longitudinal study from UVA and UCLA examined teacher turnover across all publicly funded center-based early childhood sites in Louisiana from 2016 to 2019. And this research revealed that in our state, nearly half of our child care teachers, 46%, are leaving their classrooms every year. That's 1 in 2 child care teachers. We know that young children benefit from stable relationships with caregivers. So high levels of turnover negatively impact children, create stressful and chaotic environments for programs, and compromise state and local investments in quality improvement. Why are we seeing such high turnover? Caring for young children is physically taxing, high stress work, Yet early childhood educators are among the lowest paid workers in our state's workforce, as has been mentioned, earning on average less than $10 an hour. A 2021 Yale School of Medicine report revealed that wages are the strongest predictor of staff turnover in early childhood programs. Programs that pay higher wages to their educators have lower turnover rates than centers paying lower wages. I'm sure that early childhood program leaders would pay their teachers more if they could, but programs operate within the confines of their budgets, many relying on state subsidies such as CCAP, and can only pay teachers so much. So given today's discussion earlier on increasing retention of educators and incentivizing educators to join the field, I just want to note that the proposed increase to CCAP rates would signal a significant public investment, not only in the children served by early childhood programs, but in the educators and the providers who provide such a critical piece of our state's human infrastructure. So thank you all very much for your support.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your comments. Next I have Ms. Sonia Joseph. Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Rochelle Wilcox. Ms. Wilcox.
Good afternoon. First, I want to say thank you.
If you would please identify yourself and your organization.
Sure. Rochelle Wilcox. I am the Executive Director of Wilcox Academy of Early Learning and also the co-founder of For Providers for Providers. Again, I want to say thank you, but I also want to say that working in ECE, we often feel invisible, marginalized, and undervalued. This rate increase in eligibility expansion says otherwise to our children, our teachers, our family, and the small business owners who often go broke just to open their doors to the community. This CCAP increase and eligibility expansion says we matter. However, with that rate increase, it will continue to help us to increase teacher salaries, in addition to encouraging others to join and stay in the field that they love. This is hard work, and most of our teachers and the providers are in poverty. Why is it that the hard work that we do, we can't live our American dream? This is what we are asking for today. Again, in closing, I want to say thank you to you all for your time. I want to say thank you for supporting this increase, and I want to say thank you for making sure that we can stay in our communities. Our communities matter, and what you do today matters. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And lastly, I have Ms. Gilliard Places.
I'll wait, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks everyone for coming out and sharing your comments with us today. I'm sorry, it looks like I have one more. Ms. Karan Mccorley. Ms. Corley?
Good morning, BESE board members and actual members here that attend people in the public. I would like to speak on how this is. My name is Karan Mccorley. I am a co-director and co-founder of FAITH, which believes in fairness, accountability, transparency, and of course excellence for individuals with disabilities. One of the things I want to speak about is how child care assistance will be important for our children with disabilities. As you know, our children with disabilities are not afforded the same opportunity as other children to be able to attend actual daycare. This is strictly because they are not able to afford them the proper accommodations that they need. If this board actually would attend the state interagency coordination committee that deals with early steps, you will see that a lot of the children with disabilities that are receiving services from early steps are not afforded the opportunity because they do not have enough therapists. That's important and that is imperative for our children. Our children with disabilities are always left at the wayside every single day. We have to make sure that each and every child counts and each and every child matters. So as I sit here before you today, I want to ask that not only that we
increase the amount, but that we allow more children with disabilities the opportunity to early access into these centers and the proper accommodations. As we know, that do fall under the American Disabilities Act, where they are supposed to be afforded those accommodations. That's also falling upon Title II, Title III, and many other federal laws that we sometimes seem to forget about. I ask that you look at facilities such as Bluebridge that actually allow children with disabilities that are nonverbal and that are therefore hard of hearing access to American Sign Language, like interpreters, at an early age. That's important, because my child was not afforded that opportunity years ago. So I thank you, and I ask that you not only do this, but that you make sure that the children with disabilities are at the forefront. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your comment. Additionally, I have 21 cards here for folks who support the recommendation but do not wish to speak. I'm not going to call out everybody's name, but I just want to assure you that your name will be added to the record in support of the recommendation. Thank you. Dr. Davis?
I'd just like to briefly state that several years ago, I co-authored a report with the Louisiana Policy Institute of Children that highlighted not only all the things that you're talking about here in this room, but these numbers will be even bigger in today's dollars, that employee absences and turnovers due to child care issues cost Louisiana employers $186 million a year. Louisiana lost almost $84 million in tax revenue. Child care issues result in $1.1 billion of losses annually for Louisiana's economy. And 14% of Louisiana parents with young children turned down a promotion due to child care issues. 16% quit their jobs and 8% were fired because of child care issues. And so I hope that this board, when it comes time for us to commit state dollars to early child care, that we'll be there to testify in support of those bills. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Other members, comments? Okay, hearing none. Is there any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion passes. Next item.
The next item is on page 158, item 4.1, consideration of an update report regarding the application form and parent guidance document pertaining to LEA student transfer request appeals per Act 420 of the 2021 regular legislative session. The department recommendation is to receive the report regarding the appeals process for a denied student transfer request. Updated backup documentation has been distributed.
Can we get a motion? Dr. Davis, second. Mr. Garvey? Thank you. Superintendent? Members, comments?
Yes.
Mr. Garvey?
Yes, I'd like to thank the superintendent for putting this together. I have a question. Is this the final form, or can there be some adjustments made to the request form and the fact sheet?
Yeah, absolutely. If the board chooses to modify in any particular way, we're happy to hear that. This was just a base form that we put forward for your consideration.
Well, I think it's a great start. I would like to point out, if I could, though, that under the most recent school letter grade portion, the parent is supposed to look up the letter grade and list it here for the school they're in, the school they want to go to. There's a note that says recent school letter grades can be found on the LGLE website. And this morning I went to the website, on the, I think you call it the launch page. I don't see anything that says school letter grade. I see something that says measuring results, which kind of sounds like where you might go to get school letter grades. And I click on that, and I don't see anything that says school letter grades. No button you can click on to get it. So then I went back to the launch page and I looked at school choices. And since this is a school choice issue, I thought maybe that's where you go to find the school letter grade. I clicked on that. I don't see anything that says school letter grades. I spent about 15 to 20 minutes looking. I'm sure it's here somewhere, but it's not easy to find. And so I have two questions. Can we put a button on the launch page that says school letter grades and takes you right to the school letter grades, so that everybody, even these parents, even people who are not these parents, who might want to know what the school letter grade, can find it, man, easily. And with accountability being one of our biggest issues, I think, for the last 12 years or so at BESE, having the school letter grades easy to find, I think would be a good thing for us to do. Or maybe do both, or not require the parents to look up the letter grades in order to file a request for transfer. Or both. Can we add that, such a button to the launch page?
Yes.
What are your initial thoughts? I don't mean a commitment.
Thank you for calling into question the need for improvements to our state website. I don't think there would be disagreement among the group around that. No, that's an area where we have to do better. Letter grades and school accountability information are actually hosted on our Louisiana School Finder site, which is a different standalone site from our Louisiana Believes actual department website. Confusing enough in and of itself, I get it. The link on here, I believe, electronically goes straight to the Louisiana School Finder website, but we're happy to make that adjustment and include that information and make it as easy as possible for parents.
Be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garvey. Members, other comments?
I was just going to say, I think it's important to leave that on there, Mr. Garvey, because we're going to be we need to respond to every single request, and I don't want someone to apply that's not eligible to apply as much as possible. And I think that will help, if the school is really not eligible, a student attending that school is not eligible for transfer, that might enlighten them, oh, well, I can't do this, if they're not actually aware.
That occurred to me, and I think there may be some kind of balance that we may need to talk about, because there could be an issue, but
Instead of
maybe
saying
talk about
the
it as we
eligibility
move forward.
website, just put Louisiana School Finder and give them the actual link there.
So, I would, I have another suggestion, Ms. Davis. So your email is on here. I know in particular, like, there's a Jumpstart at LA Gov email address. You may want to do that just like for when you go on vacation or something like that, so that somebody else on staff would be able to.
What we actually talked about is we're requiring that these be mailed in.
Okay,
Because,
so the email is not going to be, it's not going to be
Because it's
emailed.
like the notice of intent process, we can't necessarily verify that the person emailing is a person that's eligible, is the legal parent or guardian.
Okay.
That concerns me, could just be from anyone.
Okay, so you're
I don't
checking.
have proof that that's actually.
So you're
that
editing,
person.
you're editing the part about the email. It's not going to be emailed in, it'll actually be mailed in. Okay, I thought that would be. And then I need someone to talk me through, it's the third bullet. If BESE determines that the transfer request denial was not in compliance with school and/or district policy, the LEA shall reconsider the transfer request. What does that really mean?
Restate your question.
Yes.
It's the third bullet. So if you look at the form we're all looking at on page 159, the third bullet says, if BESE determines that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is, unless I'm told otherwise, I believe that is what the actual legislation calls for us to do. So we are essentially, what you are essentially as a board, determining did the LEA follow their own established policy or not? And if it is determined here that they did not follow their established policy, then it goes back to the LEA for them to reconsider that request. And I think that language is coming directly from the law, and I think that that's where ultimately that bill landed. I don't think it's where it started, but I think it's where it landed.
Okay. So Ms. Davis, how's this going to work for us? What is it going to look like?
It's going to be as they come in, hopefully, we'll try to stick to that June deadline, but as the requests come in, they will be added to the next available agenda for your consideration. And we'll have, we don't necessarily have to have a denial issued by the district, not just a verbal, oh, we don't have room for you. And then the board will consider if the capacity issue was the issue, or if there is no reason why the student should not be allowed to transfer, and we'll inform the district of the decision after. Does that make sense?
Other members?
Mr. Garvey, one of the other areas I heard on a particular forum was maybe the need for a comment section, just an open comment section around, you know, why the parent feels like they want to make a transfer. Is it for academic reasons? Is it for school safety reasons? Is it for some other reason that we're not aware of? So we had also heard some discussion around a comment section being on here to be able to capture some of that information.
That would be one way. I think it would be good for us to know why it is that our parents are looking to make these changes.
There is a comment.
President Holloway?
Well, it's indicating comments regarding reasons for transfer. Is that different?
That may be on the new updated form.
Other comments? Ms. Ellis?
Can I get some clarification around May 15th? Is that for our June BESE meeting? Like, is that for the date? And is that for the next year, the next school year? Because that's kind of
Yes, well, yes, obviously, they're not going to transfer to into that. Yes, because we know that also, you know, schools, that will be after the time where a lot of the planning has occurred for your teacher assignments in schools, and it'll be for the next year.
Other comments?
Does the law articulate the timeline? Because one of the things that we're seeing in our district is the number of students coming in even after school starts.
It does not, but that's just our preference, but we will take them at any time. In other words, they could, obviously, if it's after May, it will be for the next school year, but that will take care of the fact that if it comes along during the school year, that will come to you on an individual basis, but hopefully we're trying to get them in by June for the next school year. Does that make sense?
It does. I think the question I have is, do schools really know what their capacity is in June for the 22-23 school year? Because there's no requirement for families to not move after, and honestly, families typically wait until the summer to move. So schools don't know where, you'll end up with a whole bunch of first graders. Well, where do these first graders come from? They moved into the district. So I think I have questions about the schools in the districts truly knowing what their capacity is for the following school year in June.
Right, I think what you were saying is that the school systems usually come up with their rosters of teachers and with a cap on the amount of students they can take. And I think they will have an idea, or teachers, and I think they will have an idea in May if they're going to need another teacher for kindergarten, for example, if they're maxed out. So they will have an idea of capacity in May, I think.
There's other questions? President Holloway.
I have a question, Ms. Davidson, what you indicated about an app coming in and not at a specific time, and then they have to wait out a year? Is that what I understood?
No, you don't have to wait out a year. They will come, we're shooting for May for the next school year. But obviously, if they come to us during the school year, we will still bring them to you within 90 days.
So students could transfer within a school year, is that
Yes,
right?
absolutely. Yes.
I'm still along the lines of, as you're thinking about what Dr. Bofi is saying about the capacity in a school, knowing their capacity in May, it's going to be very difficult for them. So just keep that in mind.
I had a couple of thoughts. So one consideration is the school capacity, which I would think would be a function of the building square footage. The other is the current enrollment, and how current enrollment relates to that building capacity. So my question is, where would both of those data points be stored? How could parents and BESE members find both of those data points for all the schools in question?
assumes that that would be something, when they made the request, that the district would communicate back to them as a response to their application for a transfer.
Any thoughts on that, how we would make that information readily available to parents so they would know what their situation is, and then also to inform BESE members?
Well, my position would be to make this as simple on a parent as possible. If they're choosing to exercise this particular provision of the law, and I think anything that we could do, this is a BESE office option, but certainly, as Ms. Davis has indicated, anything that the BESE office can do to simplify that process, they want to do that. And you are correct. I mean, capacity of a building is going to be established and known going into the next school year, unless there's some construction project that's ongoing or an actual disaster that's just capacity. The unknown will be enrollment, actual enrollment. And that's why I think even though that there was a desire to have a particular date from BESE office, as she's also indicated, there will have to be a rolling approach to this in some way, so that the student doesn't get caught in a situation where they are eligible for this but unable to move for longer particular point in time, and they so desire.
Dr. Davis?
To Dr. Baca's comments, I mean, I have raised this when we were first talking about this, the fact that there's a reason we don't do our MFP counts until October and February, because we don't know what our school year is going, what our school enrollment is going to look like until it actually happens. And to Mr. Morris's point about how we're going to know capacity, am I misremembering when we discussed this at the last meeting? I thought that school districts determined their capacity for enrollment in their school, because we can't use just capacity at the building level, because grades come into play. Like they might have capacity in the 5th grade, but not in the 1st grade. And so that we were going to be beholden to school districts to tell us, here is what we said was our capacity at this school, and this is why we had to turn down this transfer request.
Yeah, that's accurate. I mean, the function of this board, and if there's an attorney present reading the law differently, I'd certainly welcome their interpretation. But the function of this board will be to examine the capacity that the local system has already set. They set their capacity. And then the function of this board will be to determine, did the local system indeed follow their own procedures and practices to either approve a student entering the school or to deny the student entering the school. And if this board finds that the system did not utilize their own practice correctly, then it would go back to the system in some way with a recommendation to reconsider.
So I still go back to where this data is going to be posted, and if it has a timestamp relevant to the date of the denial, and how we as a board are able to assess that information.
Where are we going to find it? When they come into the office, they'll be date stamped and put on the agenda for the next BESE meeting. And I will write a letter. I can send those, copy those to the board, to the applicant, notifying them that we were in receipt of their request, and it will be considered at the academic goals meeting in whatever month is next available. Unless we've gone live and like we're a week out going, for, you know what I'm saying, not June necessarily. But if we're just in 2 days off from coming to a board meeting, I may not be able to get it on the agenda if there's not already that item without revising. But I'll make it as fair as possible.
Negotiate.
Yeah, I'm trying to look up the statute as we speak. Part of it says sufficient capacity at the appropriate grade levels. We're not talking about building capacity. We're looking at capacity to enroll a student in 1st grade or 2nd grade or 3rd grade, 4th grade. And I'm still trying to find it, but I thought I remembered there was some timelines in a statute that said March. And I'm not sure if it was March to school systems to accept the request for transfer. I think it's in the month of March. Maybe we can look at that overnight if we have to and clarify that tomorrow if we have to. But I think the timing thing, I think it's set in statute. Normally, what happens is school performance scores come out the fall. So that's the one you base it on, that the request would be based on for the following year. You know, we keep the schedule. So right now, we've got school performance scores, I guess better back to 2019 right now, but the new ones would have come out this past fall, October or November. And then schools begin staffing in the spring, you know, for a number of classes you're going to have, teachers you have to hire, because you're out there doing the hiring in the spring and early summer. And you have your registration set. Now, Dr. Wolfie's place, a lot of kids and families that move in between, but you usually set your staffing and such in that spring. And then if you have disproportionate number of kids who arrive over the summer, you may have to make adjustments. So it's really a fluid kind of thing, but I think we need to look at the statute for the actual timing, and I think it says March.
Thank you, Susan.
The March to the districts, Ms. Boucher,
I don't remember, you know, I remember March, but I don't remember the actual verbiage. So I think it would be incumbent upon us to just check the statutes.
Dr. Cody.
Well, Ms. Orange Jones has something to say, so before she starts questioning me again, I want to hear what she has to say.
Thanks, Dr. Bogie. I just wanted, this is really a question maybe, Dr. Brumley, for you or maybe someone on your team. What, can you size up do you have any sense of what number of families might access this? Like, is this 1%? I just am trying to understand the scope.
Yeah. So I'm going to make some interpretations. The law was created and passed to address situations, and again, my interpretation, where families had a desire to make a choice decision and were for some reason denied the opportunity to do that. Maybe the system said, you can't make that move because we don't have enough room in this building. Just as an example, not to say anyone did that. But I think that is one of the most essential intents of the law. We do not have any record whatsoever because we haven't been called to collect data at the department over historically around if this happens, the extent to which it happens. What I do think is important, and it's something that Superintendent Boucher called out, I believe, in March, is, and this is very, this is personal/professional story of my time in Jefferson Parish. What we found is that very few students were utilizing the school choice option, and in fact, I want to say of a system of over 50,000, less than like 20 students were utilizing this opportunity. And so I began to question what is the root cause of only 20 students utilizing this opportunity. And what I found is that it was only after the school year began that the opportunity was offered to families. And so by that point, the child had already knew a teacher, they made friends, and so the family wasn't going to change the location for the child at that particular time. So we made the decision, we said, look, we know when school performance scores are going to come in, let's make this opportunity available to families in the spring ahead of the summer so that they can make school decisions, buy uniforms, supplies, and know where they are going. And so just with that simple change alone, we saw, I want to say 150 kids the next school year take advantage of the opportunity. So I think where it speaks in the law around March, it's saying school systems need to notify families during that particular window so that we don't get into a situation where it's the beginning of the school and then they're trying to make these decisions.
Okay.
But to go back to your actual question, we have no count on number of instances when this has happened.
Okay, great. But we will track it this year. Like, this will be the first year of real data.
I think the BESE office would be tracking the number of appeals that would come in.
Appeals, okay, that's going to be important. Thank you.
I think, if I might add something, I think what was happening was it was not a formalized process for parents, and they were asking for transfers, and then said, oh, well, we just can't do that. There was no written response, which is what we're requiring here, which is now going to require the districts to write it. So I think, yes, there will be data, because it will be a public record.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I looked up Act 420 in the, that was just passed in that last session. And you have to remember, the schools have to have a school policy that addresses this posted on its website. Now this, the statute is reading, Act 420 is reading on that the schools have to, they have to adopt a policy. The policy shall include a definition of capacity for each school, the transfer period, which shall begin no later than March 1st and end no earlier than March 28th annually. So during the month of March, families would have to make the request to the school system based on the prior fall's school performance score. So it sets the period of time for the local school district to receive the request in the month of March. So the statute gives that. Now, if they're denied, I presume, then they would come to BESE for a hearing after that, but they would have to make an initial request to the school district by the end of March.
Thank you, Superintendent. Dr. Bowman?
I just wanted to offer, or let me ask a clarifying question first. Is this the sole responsibility for BESE? Is the Department of Ed, does the Department of Ed not have a responsibility connected to this work?
I think, for one, we're going to, within the law, begin to track transfers, inter-district transfers as a result of this.
Okay. So that is
And
aligned.
we're here to support this, endeavor. We're not just going to say, oh, that's the BESE office level. We're not going to be there to support it. We're going to gladly support the effort.
Okay. So it was connected to what I was picking up from the conversation. I just think in order for people to be successful, you have to know who's ultimately responsible, right? Like, we need a lot of clarity in who's responsible. And it sounds like our office is going to be responsible for this. And I just wanted to offer any brainstorming support that you need, Ms. Davis, or to our new slate of officers, any brainstorming support you might need. I don't know if we're going to need maybe a work group to think this through, but it's new, right? It's so I think there's some planning that's going to need to go into place. That also, as we're implementing this, something that we're going to need to be reflective to make sure that it is as streamlined and successful as possible. Because I also think, we've come a long way, especially like the certification appeals. You guys, I think, added a new document. Maybe you added it before, but I saw a new document this time that I think is extremely helpful. So just thinking through how we present information in a way that supports the board and make sure that that we have the information that we need and we're able to access it in a way that's efficient is really important to me, because you all know that I don't have a whole lot of time, but I care a ton about kids. So any help you might need on brainstorming on the front end, let me know. Okay, thank you.
That was what concerned me about the bill in general was, am I going to need another person to process this? So I did put in a fiscal note for that. Because I don't know the level that we'll be getting. Privacy is an issue. I didn't want students coming before, the board in that way. So we're going to have to do some more.
With some planning to make sure we're ready to make these decisions. Okay.
Form, that form will likely.
Well, I'm glad we're talking about it now, so we're ready for when it comes later. Thank you so much.
Ms. Davis, could we go ahead and just make that a formal agenda item in March so that we can get an update on this item and we can track it all the way to June so that we feel good about June? Thank you. Dr. Davis?
If this gets to just Dr. Lundy's comment about process, there's I think a little bit of a disconnect between the language in Bullet 3 and Bullet 4, because it says that if we say that the local district did not follow their own policy, that the LEA shall reconsider. But bullet point number 4 says that we will not approve a transfer request. And so that's a disconnect between, it's going back to the LEA, well, then what's the role for BESE in the approval process? I think that as we think about what that looks like, that has to be spelled out. Like, so if the LEA, we send it back and they say no again, does it come back to us and that's where BESE approves or disapproves the transfer? I don't know the answer to that.
I think it will be part of the evaluation of the appeal. I will see if all the necessary documentation is available, the denial, and then it will have to be in order to come to you. So it may be sent back by the agency and not necessarily the board if there was something not followed. I mean, that's something to consider.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Other comments, members? Okay, here, sure, Ms. Armstrong.
One more thing, I know a lot of our questions today have been fairly operational, but as Dr. Davis is new work, I am curious, wouldn't it be, is it safe to assume that the most common reason that transfers are denied is enrollment? Like, is that the right assumption to start from? That means for you, Dr. Brown. I know we don't have full data, but just based on what we understand, that is the reason that is likely why a transfer would not be approved by a local LEA. Is that correct?
Again, I don't even know the magnitude of this happening, so I wouldn't be able to track out rationale for why it happened.
Okay, so then our role would be, so if the reason given for a transfer is that enrollment means that there's not availability, there's not actual spots for that child, our role would be, we would think that's a fact, that is a reason that we would, as a board, say, we understand why the transfer can't happen. I'm trying to understand what is the basis for our judgment?
You will be, and again, at some point we may want to engage the BESE staff attorney not staff attorney, the BESE attorney on this. But you would essentially be, from my appreciation, you would be making a decision of, did the LEA follow their own procedure? So they, as Superintendent Boucher said, everyone has to develop their capacity, their procedure, their process to handle this. And so the basis for appeal would be denial at the local level. It would come here, and then this board and or a subgroup of the board or working committee of the board, however that would be determined, would then be responsible for making a determination if that LEA followed their own processes correctly. And if they didn't, you would let them know that you believe they did not indeed follow their own established procedures correctly.
And we as a board might not see that the same way, so we would then discuss it. That would be the board's work. Like, we would basically discuss it the way in executive session we might discuss a certification case.
Yes, but again, here I would go back to just a comment, like, I think you would probably want to engage BESE attorney on this particular issue to make sure you are following the letter of the law. I'm just giving you my interpretation. You probably want to engage your attorney.
Thank you.
Other comments? Superintendent Boucher.
I just have a question, because I really haven't looked at any of this recently. When charter schools talk about this, or is this one of the ones that are back up? In other words, are we getting into capacity charter schools?
I want to say, wasn't New Orleans excluded?
Under this or not?
I can't recall now.
I don't remember either. If you just find out, maybe.
Could you take that as a follow-up, Ms. Davis? Could you take that as a follow-up? Members, other comments? Okay, hearing none, is there any objection to the motion? Seeing none, motion passes. Next item, please.
I do have something that Ms. Davis said we needed to go back on. That is 3.3. Can we go back to look at 3.3 and clarify whether or not the waiver just applies to LSDIs? Ms. Davis informed me that when we took an appeal like this in the past, we specified the school.
Yes, and I did confirm with Mr. Lambert that if we need to capture LSBI only in the recommendation and in the motion, as we approved it as a special school district, but it's not the deaf school. And so I think it's very important to capture that.
Thank you for that clarification.
Reconsider that and approve.
Thank you, Dr. Bo.
I think you just note in the minutes that it's for a specific school, but that's my opinion.
Next item.
The next item is on page 161, item 4.2, consideration of top tech early start training program providers. The department recommendation is to approve ABC Pelican Chapter Associated Builders and Contractors, Ayers Career College, and New Orleans Career Center as existing program providers, and approve Monroe Electrical Joint Apprenticeship and Training Committee as a new program provider for the 2022-2023 academic year.
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Got a second? Thank you. Superintendent?
Just a brief comment that we will continue to do everything within our power to elevate career and technical education. Tradecraft in this state, they've been diminished for far too long. And there are wonderful opportunities for students to have certifications, credentials, and apprenticeships in their communities. And so we'll continue to elevate that work. Happy for the existing partners to continue to partner with us. And also happy to see a partner around electrical work in Monroe come on as a partner with us moving forward. So thank you, Mr. Moore.
Members, any comments on this? We do have one public comment. I believe it's the gentleman that Dr. Rowland just spoke to, Mr. Matt Green. He supports the recommendation, but does not wish to speak. Members, we have a motion on the floor. Is there any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion passes. Next item, please.
The next item is on page 166, item 6.1, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 127, Lead Connect Assessment, Louisiana Connectors for Students with significant cognitive disabilities regarding English language learners. The department recommendation is to approve as notice of intent revisions to Bulletin 127.
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Bovee. Second. Superintendent Bochet. Thank you. Superintendent Brown. No comment. Comment cards? No comment cards. Any objection to the motion, members? Hearing none, motion passes. Next item, please.
The next item is on page 175, item 6.3, consideration of revisions to bulletins in response to Act 353 of the 2021 regular legislative session. The department recommendation is to approve as notices of intent revisions to Bulletin 126, 741, and 741 non-public regarding educator in-service training requirements on recognizing adverse childhood experiences and the utilization of trauma-informed education.
Motion, President Holloway. Second. Dr. Bovee. Thank you. Superintendent Roman.
Yeah, just briefly, this again is in response to legislation from the last session where educators have to receive training in trauma-informed care. And so all we're doing is an ACE, and we are making sure that that's provided for in that policy.
Superintendent Bochet.
I just have a question. Is it in the law, in the revision to two of the handbooks, it says that, and not the third one, in two of the handbooks, it says that it has to be provided on a day that other types of in-service training can be provided. So my question is, all required in-service training that we do for our teachers, we usually set them up over the course of the year, either through online or planetary trainings or whatever, where we reserve in-service days for the curriculum-based PD. So is it required by legislation that it be on the same day as other types of in-service training? You see what I'm saying? In two of the bulletins you have it in one of the bulletins you don't have it.
My assumption around that, Superintendent Bochet, would be that that was an attempt to make it more acceptable probably to teachers so that they would not feel like they were having to come back to school on a separate day to do this. I'm not aware of the need that it would have to be taking place on a day when you were doing other activities.
So if we put it in our policy, though, we have to do it on the day we're doing other training. So my question is that in law, or did we just put this in?
I would need to go for the law.
Can we check on that and talk about it tomorrow? Because I might change my motion or my support of the motion. It's one thing to tell people what they have to do, it's another thing to tell people when they have to do it. And I'm thinking of that from the same spirit that Ms. Boucher is, not in asking teachers to do more, but in terms of the planning and making sure it's at a time where it fits.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine a situation where a legislator with this particular law would require it to have to go on a particular day, but Mr. Moss's here to make some comments on it as he tracks that legislation.
Because in the charter school manual, you don't have that, but in the non-public and the public school, you do. So,
Maybe Mr. Moss could provide some clarification. Moss?
Yeah, from my appreciation of the legislation that was going through the process and afterwards, it did require that it had to be done during during their work day. So on the top, like they wouldn't do it on their off time. In other words, it would have to be done during the school day, but not at a specific professional development time.
wait,
Does that make sense?
not specific professional
So,
development
like
time?
if you said, it just had to have happened during the school day or during their working time. It cannot happen on their personal time.
So it could be during planning or whatever.
Yes.
So could we maybe, if that is the case, could we modify this language to say during the regular school day or something, as opposed to on the same day as other types of in-service training are provided?
So Superintendent Boucher, the law says the in-service training required shall be provided on a day that other types of in-service training will be provided in accordance with the school calendar adopted by each public school governing authority.
Okay, well, then it is in the law, and why wouldn't we have it in all three?
That must have been an oversight. I didn't write the policy for it, but that is something that we can add in, because if it's in the law, it should be required.
In the second, we just highlighted adding this to our other instances, so it could already be there. It's just something we have to look at. We didn't put the whole policy. It's already there.
So the language will be the same for all three handbooks?
Yes, and what I'm saying is we added this to the list of training for other.
Ms. Davis, could we get that clarification and then revisit this item
Yes,
tomorrow?
sure.
So what I'm hearing is we're going to defer this item until tomorrow, is that right?
Whatever the law says, it's fine.
Okay.
We can still on with it, just get clarification tomorrow. It's fine.
Okay, and get clarification tomorrow. All right, thank you. Members, any other comments on this one?
Mr. Morris, I just want to reiterate, I recognize we have to read the law, but just as a statement from the legislature, I know that they spend a lot of time thinking about not adding additional things in the afternoon. So I think the intent was simply to let teachers know this would have to be done on the time when they're already in the building, you're not going to have to come back on a Saturday to do this. So we can make an adjustment tomorrow.
Thank you, Superintendent Brown. Any other comments, members? All right, any objection to the motion? Okay, thank you, Nick. We do have one public comment card. Ms. Karan Mccorley, and Ms. Mccorley wishes to speak.
Great afternoon. I strongly oppose the considerations for the revisions, so let me state my multiple reasons. One, we never seem to hold the charter system accountable to the same rules and regulations as our traditional public schools, and yet they want to be called a public school. That's a problem. When First Lady Governor Evans asked for this particular bill to become law, it was because our children with disabilities, as well as the regular age children, are being demonized and ridiculed at alarming rates in Orleans Parish school system, which is 100% charter. We have to look at when will we think about the children. That is what each and every last one of you are having to sit up here today to talk about. Children. These same children that will take care of you if you're in a nursing home. These same children that will take care of you if you need to be in a hospital, in an emergency room, in an ICU unit. Same children that will have to listen to your lawsuit if you need a lawyer, may actually end up being the judge. Who knows? But these children seem to have adverse childhood experiences, and the social emotional learning just not getting addressed. So as we sit here today, we need to consider the children, but more importantly, let's look at our children with disabilities. As a co-founder and co-director of FATE, that believe in fairness, accountability, transparency, and excellence, we see that the children with disabilities are always left behind. They are never at the forefront. And when they enter into the school system at the age of 3, if they transition through early steps, they are already left behind. Every Student Succeed Act says that every child matters, and it also has a real true criteria in which we are poised to actually put in place. We never do. We never allow the parents to be a part of that process. And we also make sure the staff is never educated. So let's actually follow the law the way it is actually written. And if you need to make any considerations or revisions, take that back to the Senate Education Committee, where Senator Katrina Jackson can actually make those proper revisions. I know Mr. K. Bromley likes to always say that BESE don't have the power to mandate and enforce. So please, don't try to take that power now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mr. Morris, I would like to call Mr. Vaughn on back up. He's taking some time to go and review the law. He's taking some time to review the law, Senator Jackson's law.
Yeah, so going back to why it looks differently in the charter school handbook is actually just a formatting thing. If you look under, there's a list of laws that apply to charter schools, and what it does is it simply says that charter schools must abide by this law stated in there. It's slightly different than how we write the policy in the non-publics and in the school handbook. It's just a formatting difference. In the charter one, it says this law applies to charters, and you drop in the law. We go into more detail in the handbook for 741. So it's not that they have anything different. It just drops in the actual law. It just doesn't have all that filled out, because that's just the formatting of how that bulletin is written. Does that clarify the question of why it looks differently?
Well, yeah, actually, the only point I was trying to get to is it in the law we have to do it the same day? And if it wasn't in one, that would lead me to believe it was not in one. And that was the only reason for that comparison.
Yes, ma'am.
In this case.
Yes, ma'am. And that is the case, that they all have to be done at the same time for all different types.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Members, any other comments? Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion passed. Superintendent Romney, I believe that's the last item on our agenda. I just wanted to take a moment. This January, BESE, it's my turn of chairing this committee, so I want to take the opportunity to thank President Holloway for the opportunity to serve the board in this capacity and represent District 6 in this capacity. Also, I want to thank Mr. Johnson for his service on the board, because I believe he rotates off as well. And then Superintendent Romney, just special thanks to you, and particularly Dr. Jason and where's Ken at? And Mr. Ken as well for the important work they're doing for the state. You guys are doing some great work. We really, really appreciate you guys, and wish you the best going forward. Thank you. Ms. Landry?
That concludes your agenda. The next meeting will begin at 2 o'clock.